misleading Congress and the American people in an attempt to destroy Medicare. In his conduct while President of the United States, George W. Bush, in violation of his constitutional oath to faithfully execute the office of President of the United States and to the best of his ability preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States, and in violation of his constitutional duty under Article 2, Section 3 of the Constitution, to take care that the laws be faithfully executed, has both personally and acting through his agents and subordinates, together with the Vice President, pursued policies which deliberately drained the fiscal resources of Medicare by forcing it to compete with subsidized private insurance plans, which are allowed to arbitrarily select or not select those they will cover, failing to provide reasonable levels of reimbursement to Medicare providers, thereby discouraging providers from participating in the program, and designing a Medicare Part D benefit without cost controls, which allowed pharmaceutical companies to gouge the American taxpayers for the price of prescription drugs. The President created, manipulated, and disseminated information given to the citizens and to the Congress of the United States in support of his prescription drug plan for Medicare that enriched drug companies while failing to save beneficiaries sufficient money on their prescription drugs. He misled Congress and the American people into thinking the cost of the benefit was $400 billion. It was widely understood that if the cost exceeded that amount, the bill would not pass due to concerns about fiscal irresponsibility. A Medicare actuary who possessed information regarding the true cost of the plan, which was not $400 billion but $539 billion, was instructed by the Medicare administrator to deny congressional requests for the information. The actuary was threatened with sanctions if the information was disclosed to Congress, which, unaware of the information, approved the bill. Despite the fact that official cost estimates far exceeded $400 billion, President Bush offered assurances to Congress that the cost was $400 billion, when his office had information to the contrary. In the House of Representatives, the bill passed by a single vote, and the conference report passed by only 5 votes. The White House knew the actual cost of the drug benefit was high enough to prevent its passage. Yet the White House concealed the truth and impeded an investigation into its culpability. In all of these decisions and actions, President George W. Bush has acted in a manner contrary to his trust as President and Commander-in-Chief, and subversive of constitutional government, to the prejudice and the cause of justice, and to the manifest injury of the people of the United States. Wherefore, President George W. Bush, by such conduct, is guilty of an impeachable offense warranting removal from office. Article 31. Katrina. Failure to plan for the predicted disaster of Hurricane Katrina, failure to respond to a civil emergency. In his conduct while President of the United States, George W. Bush, in violation of his constitutional oath, to faithfully execute the office of President of the United States, and to the best of his ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States, and in violation of his constitutional duty under Article 2, Section 3 of the Constitution, to take care that the laws be faithfully executed, has both personally and acting through his agents and subordinates failed to take sufficient action to protect life and property prior to and in the face of Hurricane Katrina in 2005, given decades of foreknowledge of the dangers of storms to New Orleans and specific forewarnings in the days prior to the storm. The President failed to prepare for the predictable and the predicted disasters, failed to respond to an immediate need of which he was informed, and has subsequently failed to rebuild the section of our nation that was destroyed. Hurricane Katrina killed at least 1,282 people, with 2 million more displaced. 302,000 housing units were destroyed or damaged by the hurricane. 71% of those were low-income units. More than 500 sewage plants were destroyed. More than 170 point source leakages of gasoline, oil, or natural gas. More than 200 gas stations submerged. Several chemical plants, 8 oil refineries, and a Superfund site was submerged. 8 million gallons of oil spilled. Toxic materials seeped into floodwaters and spread through much of the city and surrounding areas. The predictable increased strength of hurricanes, such as Katrina, has been identified by scientists for years. And yet the Bush administration has denied this science and restricted such information from official reports, publications, and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Agency's website. Donald Kennedy, editor-in-chief of Science, wrote in 2006 that, quote, hurricane intensity has increased with oceanic surface temperatures over the past 30 years. The physics of hurricane intensity growth has clarified and explained the thermodynamic basis for these observations. Emmanuel has tested this relationship and presented convincing evidence, unquote. Now, the Federal Emergency Management's 2001 list, FEMA's 2001 list, of the top 3 most likely and most devastating disasters were a San Francisco, this is their 2001 list, San Francisco earthquake, a terrorist attack in New York, and a Category 4 hurricane hitting New Orleans, with New Orleans being the #1 item on that list. FEMA conducted a 5-day hurricane simulation exercise in 2004, Hurricane Pam mimicking a Katrina-like event. This exercise combined the National Weather Service, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the LSU Hurricane Center, and other state and federal agencies, resulting in the development of emergency response plans. The exercise demonstrated, among other things, that thousands of mainly indigent New Orleans residents would be unable to evacuate on their own. They need substantial government assistance. These plans, however, were not implemented in part due to the President's slashing of funds for protection. In the year before Hurricane Katrina hit, the President continued to cut budgets and deny grants to the Gulf Coast. In June of 2004, the Army Corps of Engineers levy budget for New Orleans was cut. And it was cut again in June of 2005, this time by $71.2 million, or a whopping 44% of the budget. As a result, the Army Corps of Engineers was forced to suspend any repair work on the levees. In 2004, FEMA denied a Louisiana disaster mitigation grant request. The President was given multiple warnings that Hurricane Katrina had a high likelihood of causing serious damage to New Orleans and the Gulf Coast. At 10 a.m. on Saturday, the 28th of August, 2005, the day before the storm hit, the National Weather Service published an alert titled, "Devastating Damage Expected." Printed in all capital letters, the alert stated that most of the area will be uninhabitable for weeks, perhaps longer. At least 1/2 of well-constructed homes will have roof and wall failure. Power outages will last for weeks. Water shortages will make human suffering incredible by modern standards. The Homeland Security Department was also briefed the President on the scenario, warning of levee breaches and severe flooding. According to the New York Times, quote, a Homeland Security Department report submitted to the White House at 1:47 a.m. on August 29th, hours before the storm hit, said, any storm rated Category 4 or greater will likely lead to severe flooding and or levee breaching, unquote. These warnings clearly contradict the statements made by President Bush immediately after the storm that such devastation could not have been predicted.